Hey there riders, Journo Kris here today, and I wanted to talk about the ZX-10R. This is the 2021 edition versus the ZH2 because I tested the ZH2 last week. I've got the ZX-10R this week and I wanted to do a comparison. Now, naturally, I'm more of a road rider. My interest in bikes is less track, much more road, and that is going to color my opinion between these two machines, because where I really have to say the ZH2 is probably one of my favorite machines I've ever ridden, and certainly be a bike that I would love to go out and buy today if I was able to. It is a very different machine than the ZX-10. The ZX-10 has 213 horsepower to the Supercharged 200 on the ZH2. And the difference is that the ZH2 has an enormous amount of torque all the way through the rev range and a really nice top end. Whereas on the ZX-10, what you're actually getting is a relatively gentle kick-in of power below, say, 3,500 RPM, and then a very, very aggressive engine characteristic, which really loves to be revved really hard. And it's got a much more aggressive characteristic, I would say, than the ZH2, which actually lends the ZH2 more to my kind of riding style and my preference between the two machines, which I've got to say, the ZX-10 probably has a little bit more capability to scare you in the general riding, where on the ZH2, it's going to be more really when you get right up in that top end and really make use of that supercharger, which is something else. What I really liked about the ZH2, which did have a ZX-10 exhaust on it, just for a note, which helped that exhaust note enormously, was that that chirping noise that it has from the supercharger is something really, really different. The ZX-10 with the stock exhaust is quite strangled and it doesn't have a huge exhaust note to it, unfortunately. So it's probably an unfair comparison there to compare those two bikes, but the ZH2 certainly had a much nicer soundtrack to it. Not just the exhaust with the ZX-10 exhaust fitted, but overall. Both of these bikes have a really nice suspension setup on them. Obviously fully adjustable, really sporty setup on the ZX-10. I found it a little bit harsh on the rear. It's possible you could adjust that out, but also being a sports bike, it's more designed at that hard-nosed kind of really, really sharp handling, and it certainly achieves that. It does, in my opinion, have a bit of an edge over the ZH2 in the handling, in the sharpness of the handling. But where I preferred the ZH2 was there was a little bit more suppleness in the suspension, particularly at the rear, and while it didn't have quite the same kind of razor sharp handling as the ZX-10, and it is a naked bike, so it has a much more relaxed overall ergonomic, I found you had to be quite aggressive on this machine as far as getting, engaged with the bike. I liked the fact on the ZH2, you didn't have to be quite so aggressive, and it still handled absolutely beautifully. They both really handle like they're on rails. The Z just doesn't have quite that same razor sharp handling as the ZX-10. However, the Z would still be my choice of the two, because you can actually kind of get more of a feeling for speed at lower speeds on the Z, because you've got a lot more torque, and the more upright seating position kind of amplifies that feeling. Whereas on this bike, what I found is it was the bike egging me on to ride harder and harder and harder, which it certainly was capable of. It's just a matter of how much I really want to risk my license past a certain point, which is really probably not that much, if I'm honest. Whereas I think I could have a little bit more fun on the Z, closer to the legal limit, which to me is important. But obviously, if you're tracking a bike like this, you're going to have a lot of fun on this bike, and really having the full fairings and the very racy ergonomics is very important. However, for an everyday bike, I would be going the ZH2. Brakes is another big difference between the two machines. Obviously, this has got the higher end brakes on the front, and initially I was surprised. Like, I felt the M4s on the ZH2 were a very nice matchup with the overall bike. On this, I was a little bit surprised. There's kind of a more gentle initial bite on those brakes, but you get a little bit into that lever throw, you get a little bit more pressure through that system, and the brakes get phenomenal, and there's a lot more power in those than on the ZH2. And I would say that probably means you've got a little bit more feel on the brakes on this, and you can certainly be a little bit more aggressive on the brakes. I still really rate the brake setup on the Z for not being too powerful, being a really nice amount of power, a really good level of modulation, but it's, you know, it just goes without saying that the brakes on this are definitely better. And this is a slightly lighter bike. There's about 30 kilos between the two machines. I would probably say it felt like the Z actually may have carried its weight a little bit lower, even though it has that enormous supercharged engine in it, where this is a little bit perhaps more top heavy. However, like I said, the handling on this is just razor sharp, so I certainly can't complain about that. It'll probably be easier to drop this bike, if I'm honest, with the more aggressive low bars on it than it would be the Z, but that's pretty regular between a sports bike and a naked bike. The electronic system on the Z seemed a little bit simpler than it is on this. Really, I just use those power modes. You've got a lot of electronics backing you up on that bike, but I like it on both of these machines in that it's not in your face. You're not having to go through a million settings. You can, but you're not having to use those electronic systems in a way that works for you. I will say that I think the ZX-10 has the clear styling advantage between the two bikes. The ZH2 really has that real muscle naked bike feel to it, but that front headlight and that front fairing setup on the new ZX-10 is something that's a little bit different. It really stands out to me, and I can't go past that. And I really do love it in this KRT color scheme, especially with, you know, the white lower fairing. It all comes together really, really nicely. But at the end of the day, they're very different style bikes, so there's probably going to be a fair bit of subjectivity to it between those two machines. A couple of other points of note: you're getting an Öhlins electronic steering damper on the front of the ZX-10R, which is a nice bit of kit. You don't get an adjustable clutch lever, unlike on the ZH2, and it's also not a hydraulic clutch on the ZX-10, again, unlike the ZH2. You've got great mirrors though for a sports bike. The indicators are integrated into them, which could be a mixed blessing depending on how you feel about that, and they are quite a large mirror, but they do the job if you ask me. Now the final point of comparison is price. The ZX-10R, the 2021 singular, is 28 grand on road here in Sydney, approximately, a little bit of change involved. The ZH2 is 25.5, so it's about 2,500 cheaper. And while I personally will admit that I'm probably over my sports bike days, if I'm really, really honest, unless I was to get back into track riding or for some reason decided to take up racing, which probably isn't likely with me, I think that the ZH2 is unbeatable value. As an amazing machine as the ZX-10R is, I think the ZH2 has a lot of benefits on the road. I think it has that unique engine characteristic. I think it feels like it's going faster than it perhaps is, being a naked bike with the upright ergonomics, which is a benefit to me because I think it's going to help you keep your license. That being said, the level of performance there would also make it very easy to lose it, but unlike the ZX-10, it isn't egging you on to quite the same extent to, you know, throw away your license every second of the day. It's also a little bit nicer to ride around town. Obviously, again, upright seating position, wide bars, everything like that really are going to benefit the ZH2. But overall, I do think that that would be the pick out of the two bikes for me. And that probably is an unfair comparison because, as I said, I'm not after a sports bike, I'm after the everyday bike, and the ZH2 there seems like amazing value. The ZX-10R, on the other hand, is, you know, fairly normally priced for most of these super sport or super bike machines now. And at the end of the day, they are a pricey bit of kit, but you're getting a lot of stuff on them to make them an ideal track weapon. So you do have to keep that in mind. So out of the two bikes, which do you think you would pick? Would you go the ZX-10R for the full-on sports bike, or would you pick a ZH2 and go for something really special with the supercharger, but a little bit more road and everyday orientated? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget you can test ride both of these machines at MotoHub in Castle Hill. The address is up on the screen and the website. Definitely check them out if you are interested in these two bikes because they're really cool machines. As I said, my personal favorite's the ZH2, and I reckon that's the one to definitely jump on board. But if you're after a sports bike, obviously the ZX-10R is going to be the one for you. As always, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching and have a great day.